salutations. My name is Kimberly HayDay,
And my name is Amanda Day.
and you're listening to the Fundraising HayDay podcast, which is the name of our podcast, the Fundraising HayDay podcast. Hi, hello.
This is where we cover the how-tos of grants and fundraising.
And how we can all do a better job of changing the world through philanthropy.
Yep. Special thanks to our Patreon subscribers who help make this podcast possible. If you want to join this amazing community, you get things like monthly playlists, a fabulous book club that in 2026 is going to meet live once a quarter. And we have these wide open episodes about mistakes were made and Kimberly's monthly musings. These are things you don't want to miss. So to join in the fun.
Because I'm always level-headed and say nothing but nice things.
Oh, sure. Visit patreon.com/fundraising HayDay. So we're so excited y'all are here and that we are back in your ears today. Last year, Kimberly and I led several in-person trainings and were able to help so many organizations understand the roles of grants within their own organization and how to build grants teams, because grants should not be a solo sport. And we also helped organizations find success with grant seeking. It's something we love to do, and we love to help others. So if your agency is interested in hosting any in-person training, whether it's covering pre-grant work like prospect research, grant writing, or anything to do with post-grant award, right? So all of your fun grant management stuff. I say fun, right? It's great.
Friends in grant making, and also the all-important sustainability. Absolutely. How do you achieve it, and how do you answer that damn question on a grant proposal here?
If it has anything to do with grants and fundraising, we'd love to talk to you about how that training could look within your community. So we have openings in 2026 and 2027. We're booking out as far out as you want to book out. We're here to book event dates with you.
We love to work with you and find one of the many, many topics that we already have on hand, or create something new to best meet the needs of you and the people you serve. So if this sounds good to you, then drop us an email, hello, as in hello, at haydayservices.com. That's HAYDAY services.com. And we would love to talk it through.
Absolutely. So today is part 2 of an episode we started 2 weeks ago. We're talking about what went wrong in 2025. So last episode, we kind of talked about this is all that happened throughout the year, even leading up to 2025. So today in this episode, we're going to focus on how grants were released and administered and what we can do to hopefully better prepare for 2026 and what we expect to be more shenanigans.
Very kind. That's not the word I would use, but here we are.
Y'all, we are so very excited to introduce our listeners to the first season 9 sponsor of the Fundraising HayDay podcast. Grant Guru is the world's largest aggregator of grants and funding, and this incredible prospect research tool has made its way all the way from Australia to the United States. It's a searchable database that is updated daily, and it is so user-friendly. We're joined today by Adrian Spencer, co-founder and director of Grant Guru, to learn more about this incredible product with a mini-series during the first 12 episodes of this season. So Adrian, last episode, we heard you talk about how Grant Guru got started in Australia. We're curious what made you decide to bring it over here to America.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Even in the early days, we were regularly approached by US-based nonprofits that were grant prospecting. So from the start, we decided to build everything to cater to the American market. We also pioneered a lot of the thinking around online grant funding that all grant databases use today. And we started to build long-term contacts into grants.gov and other key players in the sector. Our passion is to solve problems and to make people's jobs easier. We love this industry that we're a part of. And with so many grants in the US, it's a no-brainer to roll out our solutions here. After all, it's the biggest grant and funding ecosystem in the world. We figured that if we could make grant prospecting easier, then grant writers could spend more time applying and winning funding and less time looking. as we travel all around the US, we really love our American friends. They're so passionate about the work they do. They're so connected to their communities, and they're really focused on achieving good grant results, often with limited resources. If you're in this sector, it's more than a 9 to 5 job. It's a calling and it's a passion, and we just want to do our bit to help.
That's great. And
Nice.
Kimberly and I have both seen your product and are super impressed by it. So we're excited for our fellow brethren to check it out as well.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Find out more about this fantastic new resource for grant seekers. Visit grantguru.com/US. You get access to a user-friendly search engine, email alerts, grants calendar, customizable grant reports, and so much more.
And as an added bonus, Grant Guru is providing our listeners with 20% off their subscription. So when you go to make your purchase, use the discount code HayDay963. That's HayDay 963.
So let's jump in and talk about how federal grants typically work, how most grants typically work. But obviously, we're going to be focusing again on this episode on federal grants because they're sort of the canary in the coal mine of all the big changes that are affecting grant seeking, grant management, and just the well-being of so many people in general. So typically, funding programs are created through federal legislation, not edicts issued on social media. They're usually created through federal legislation, and then funding is attached to the programs through the appropriation or budget process. That's generally how it works. Most programs have an open call for applications annually, although some programs only take place, or grant cycles, I should say, only take place maybe every 2, 3, or 5 years, right? Again, this is all in usually land, just to lay it out. So what's helpful, or at least has been helpful in the past, is that these regularly occurring, congressionally approved grants attached to programs and services had their faults, but they generally would open and close around the same deadlines every year. So that if you were new to grants and you missed that deadline for something that seemed like a good fit, it would roll around maybe the next year or in the next funding cycle, because it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years, but there was some sort of continuity there. Typically, that's how it works. And now, Amanda, we went into this on our first episode ad nauseum because I was ad nauseum. I was talking a lot about it. But I know you're going to walk us through just a quick review to set the context for this discussion about what happened in 2025.
Yep. So quick review, we had the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. They terminated about 12,000 grants at the start of the year. There was a freeze on federal funding. That freeze was eventually lifted, but they still had grant processing delays, and some agencies were requiring additional steps when it came to getting, refunded and grants renewed and all that kind of fun stuff. Then because of all of those delays, funding agencies were rushing to get grant applications out the door before the end of the fiscal year. And where you normally had 30, 45, 60 days between a grant application opening up and the closing date, suddenly those were being squished often to 14 days. Some 5 days, some we've heard some horror stories about 24 hours, right? So things were, even if it is 14 days, most federal grants take between 80 and 150 hours of work to put together a quality proposal. And so 14 days, that's, 80 hours of a normal work week. So if you also do every other activity and grants is just one part of your job, can you drop everything to write a grant for 2 weeks straight? Probably not. So needless to say, it was a hot mess. Then you had the overall shifting of federal policies meant that some grants were no longer existed. They were just taken away forever. Some were in limbo. Some had requirements in place that made it difficult for agencies to promise, yes, I will do these things if I get this money. So there were a lot of grants that even though agencies needed them, they couldn't uphold some of the requirements that were suddenly being placed in grant regulations. Then in August, there was an executive order from the president that impacted federal grant making, putting senior political appointees in charge of reviewing federal grant opportunities, which of course is going to change the whole process. And to top it all off, if that wasn't enough, we had a government shutdown from October 1st through November 12th, which meant that basically little to no activity was happening during that time frame. There was no one to reach out to about applications. Almost no new applications or opportunities went live during that time frame. And so some things didn't open, some still did. It was just a hot mess. And then when they did open up, suddenly things are starting to happen quickly
Yeah.
again. So it's just a matter of nothing is normal. Nothing was normal in 2025. And so, whew, not that grants are always the exact same, but there are some things that you can, more often than not, things are pretty cyclical, right? So you can
And
plan.
not that there wasn't room for improvement, but that wasn't what this was about. And
Yeah.
again, the episode 1, if you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, we spent a lot of time talking about the root causes of this. So while this was super stressful, after about March of last year, I'm hoping that it wasn't a surprise that things were continuing to be stressful. And we go in a lot into Project 2025 and some administrative changes and some people in very powerful positions who are shaping all of this. And much more in depth in our first episode. And what I wanted to do is just briefly talk about some of the effects of this, and then we wanted to wrap up with what are some things that we can do as people working in the grants field, in the nonprofits field, in local government. 1, to take positive action, and 2, to get out of this, well, I'm just a grant writer, or I'm just that, because oh my God, live your life. But
Well, first of all,
that's
nobody is just anything, right? We bring a whole lot
right.
to the table as
And
human.
let's don't use it as an excuse, because we actually are really good at synthesizing complex information and talking about things such as these impacts that so many people suffered, particularly children and older people and other people who are most vulnerable to losses in federal funding, and also people who were outside the norms of what the new administration deemed how people should be, what they should look like, and how they should live their lives. So you obviously huge negotiations, some capitulations even, between major universities and the current administration. All sorts of programs, particularly education programs, Head Start funding, schools in general, after school programs, such huge cuts, so many things. And of course, during the government shutdown, it even went down to just the level of getting food, And just a quick reminder, this is the most prosperous country in the world with the biggest economy. Just putting that out there. But yet during the government shutdown and during all the grant freezes, there were huge lacks in services, huge needs. Many research programs were canceled. Other basic services, housing and healthcare, were disrupted. And of course, everything going on with immigrants and what's happening there, and how over and over again things are going on that are not anywhere close to the way things should be happening. Huge, scary things. And then to take it down even further into the grants arena, lots of push pull, as Amanda was talking about, lots of uncertainty. But again, I want to say now we know, and we know that many of these things that are happening are not arbitrary. Again, I would refer you to our episode 1, or just refer you to Project 2025. It's literally there in writing, and you can access it for free. and read it. This is no matter what people may say, it's a plan. I don't agree at all with the plan, but it is a well thought out plan that is being orchestrated. And the person in charge of the OMB now is the person who wrote several key chapters in Project 2025 and who is all about using government funding to bring administrative organizations to heal. While he did not write that, it is written in Project 2025, rather, that's how it should be used for, to bring administrative agencies to heal like they're like dogs on a walk. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Not, it's horrible and bad. I'm not discounting that, but it should not be a surprise. And if you continue to be surprised about this, I think you need to maybe take a minute and educate yourself and educate others. This shouldn't be a surprise. And once education is important, but just reading and posting about something online is not necessarily the doing of it. Or what I should say is reposting or commenting or getting into fights in the comments or whatever it is not activism. It's not change. It's just bloviating, sometimes an empty space. And what Amanda and I wanted to do with this episode is, and she's going to start us off with, so what are some things that you can do, right?
Yeah.
To not just go, oh, it's horrible, it's stressful. Got it, feel it, know it. But now what do we do?
Yeah. Well, and because the frustration too is I watched a piece on 60 Minutes not too long ago where they were interviewing some researchers that worked at Harvard that are doing some amazing things in the healthcare space, that their funding wasn't ripped away from them because they were misspending funds or because they weren't spending funds or that they weren't doing their reporting on time. Because I get that, right? If you're not following the rules of grant reporting, then you don't get the grant. Like that I'm okay with that. It was because they happened to be doing their research at a university that the president does not like their ways. And it's not like they are doing such nefarious things as like they're in cahoots with China and are trying to overthrow the government. They're not doing that, right? The president just doesn't like their ways. And that's not okay. And it's not just, and I've heard a lot of people go, oh, well, we're wasting money. Yeah, but if you're an agency that maybe is providing shelters for the unhoused in Detroit in the wintertime and your funding is yanked, and now you have 50, 100, 1,000 people on the streets that would have had a warm bed, and the consequences of that, right? And the people, it's not just as simple as, oh, they just lost a grant. If you've not worked in this field and don't understand the impact of grants, and it's not just as me as a grant writer, I'm not doing my job well. It's because we are doing our job well. This is impacting the lives of human beings. And that's what some people that don't see the problem with this don't seem to grasp that impact, So that's why I want to talk about that. So let us focus on, as grant professionals, because we can't solve it all, right? We can't do it all, but what can we do? So I think one of the first things we can do is have some frank conversations with your board, your leadership, your elected officials, whoever it is that's leading, whether it's your city, your county, your nonprofit, your university, whatever, about the current state of things. Because if they don't understand, like, wait, what grants, what's going on with that? They're going to assume that you're going to continue to bring in the same amount of money or maybe even more than you did last year, because for the past 12 years, they expected you to bring in 10% more funding year after year after year. So you need to have, if you haven't already done this, some frank conversations of like, hey, this is what happened in 2025. I don't expect it to change in 2026. In fact, I expect it to be even worse. So we need to start thinking about alternatives or how we're going to get around this, because we can't just, especially if for some people, there's grants you've relied on for year after year after year that is no longer in existence anymore. And it's not coming back during this administration. So what are you going to do about that? So you need to sit down and have some frank conversations with people about the state of things, so everybody's on the same page, right?
And I think too, just saying again, this is not arbitrary. It's not accidental. This blueprint, this Project 2025, these executive orders, it's systematic. It feels chaotic, but it's systematic, and actually causing chaos and fear is kind of part of the process, right?
Yeah.
Because if you get people all scared and they don't want to say anything and they want to keep their heads down, then it's going to be easier to implement these changes, right? It's going to be
Yeah.
easier to completely dismantle entire educational systems. It's going to be completely easy to dismantle FEMA, which is needs of help being more efficient. But if you dismantle everything and just send it to the states and big, huge block grants, but only certain states, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, not a good look, not a good fit. But I think it's also important to have those discussions. If you don't feel like you can start anywhere else, but if you are in charge of bringing in $20 million or $50 million of federal funding a year, let's just be real clear that is not it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen in the same way at all.
Mhm.
And the answers need to be more than, oh, we'll just write more federal grants, or we'll just write more grants in general, right?
Yep. So another thing I'd recommend is to reach out to the funders you already have because, hello, they like your work. They think you got a good product. Clearly, they're giving you funding already. And don't be afraid to have some conversations with them going, hey, we've just lost a significant portion of our funding. This is the impact it's going to have. Let's talk about is there any way you can increase your gift? Or if next year, instead of an annual gift, we can do some multi-year funding? Or can you introduce me to other funders in the community that you think would be a good match and give us that introduction to them so we can seek funding that way? And I know some of you may be going, but I only get federal grants or I only get grants from the state. Let me tell you, I have had state age, actually, it's federal money that came to the state, and then we were a subrecipient. On more than one occasion, I've had my funder come to me because we are very good about spending our money, spending it in a timely manner, that they would come to me and go, hey, we've got three other agencies that didn't spend all their money. There's only 6 months left on this time period for us to spend this. If I give you $50,000 today, could you get it spent in 6 months? And usually all they needed was a budget. So I didn't even have to fill out a full grant application. They just give me a budget for how you'd spend that $50,000 and make sure you can do it in 6 months. Heck yeah, we put together a budget and got an additional $50,000. So this is why in so many previous podcast episodes, Kimberly and I have talked about the power of relationships with your funders because you want to be able to go to them and say, hey, you've believed in us, you've supported us. We need you now more than ever. And the answer may be that they can't do anything, but you don't know that until you ask. And we should not be afraid to ask, to be honest about this is the situation that's going on right now. It's out of our control, and we could use some help right now.
Also, I think grant writers and grant professionals, grant managers, a lot of what we do is, or a big part of what we do is storytelling. So tell that story.
Yeah.
Get your numbers together and talk about it, right? And talk about it, not just with grant making organizations, right? With other folks as well.
Yep. Another thing Kimberly and I have talked about a lot is growing your fundraising in other areas, diversifying your portfolio. So if you're someone who's relied on the same five grants year after year after year, you're probably, and those grants went away, you are certainly in a pickle now. And obviously you can't go back 10 years and rethink it all, but now's the time to start thinking about what are other things that we can do to offset this. And I'm not telling everybody who got federal grants to suddenly jump into the foundation space, because first of all, not everybody can be in the foundation space. Um, but also, there's not nearly as much money there, right? And most of that money gets used every year. So all you're doing is making it even more competitive. There's no guarantee that you're going to get it. And if you do, that means it's going to you and not somebody else who had been receiving it in years past, right? So that's not just turning to foundation grants or another state grants only or this kind of grants. That's sure you can give that a whirl, but that's not alone the answer. You need to think about, if you're a nonprofit, are you do you have monthly donors? Are you doing, events? I know we've talked before about events aren't always the answer, and I'm not saying it is the answer, but some events can be the answer for some types of organizations. Are you using volunteers? Were to the best of your ability? Do you have partnerships? Are there things that other agencies do well that maybe they could be the one doing that for you? So that's less that you're having to pay out. And maybe you're doing some things better that they're doing. So they're not having to spend money on that. And you can collaborate together. So it's more efficient in the work that you're doing. But you really need to start thinking about what are other ways we can continue to do this work that is so important and necessary, and figuring out other ways to pay for it. Another thing I'll say is to remind your elected officials about the great successes you've had with specific grant programs. I'm talking about your congressmen, your representatives, those kinds of things. And no, I'm not saying lobby, don't going, you better give us more money, but it's not lobbying to say, hey, I just want to tell you in 2024, we received the blah, blah, blah grant. We received $200,000. And through that program, we were able to feed this many people, house this many people, educate this many people, whatever it is you did with it, what your success were, is just kind of in their ear going, oh, my community got this money. And they're smart enough to know that you're not getting it again this year and the impact that's going to have. So you're not lobbying them, you're just educating them about, hey, we got this grant before, here was a success.
Can I just hop in and say lobbying is not educating
No.
an elected official. Lobbying is if you call them up and go, yeah, I need you to vote yes on Bill 323Q because we need more coal burning plants or whatever. I mean, that it's when you're asking for a specific action on a piece of legislation, that's lobbying. Advocacy is another animal altogether. And everyone who's getting pushback is, we can't say anything. Well, then how are things going to change? And also, you are constituents, nonprofit and local government agencies are huge employers across the country and represent significant parts of the economy. Hospitals, universities, down to shelters,
Mm-hmm.
animal shelter. I mean, they're employers and they're voters who work there and they're voters who are being served by these agencies. Okay, not the animal shelter part, but certainly they're volunteers and staff at animal shelters, and everyone in that person's constituent area is a voter, right? You don't have to go, oh, we're going to tell them not to vote for you, but it's just like we employ X amount of people or nonprofits in Georgia. It is. I should have known this before I opened my mouth about this. It's definitely in the top 5 of employer, like the nonprofit industry, if you will, the nonprofit field. It's not way down in nowhere. It's, I want to say nationally, it's at least 10% of the workforce, I think.
Yeah. Well, and going back to building relationships too, if you are a nonprofit and haven't gotten to know your local elected officials, whether you're in a city, a county, a parish, a town, whatever it's called, guess what? They can lobby because if you can let them know, like, hey, we used to get this grant. It served this many people who lived here. Then that mayor could talk to some elected officials and go, hey, this grant went away. This is affecting our community and it's affecting the people who live here and the people who vote. What can we do about it? So your local governments can do more of the lobbying. And so if you're not talking to them and building relationships with them so they understand what's happening in their community, you're missing out on an opportunity as well. So I think so many people are afraid to talk, even speak to elected officials at any level because you're like, I can't lobby. If all you're doing is educating, it is not lobbying. And there are people that can then, I mean, you're not asking them to lobby. You're just saying, hey, just FYI, this is what's happening in the community where you're the mayor. And then they can go and fight for you as well. So,
and it's also not lobbying to ask, particularly your congressional officials and your senators about the appropriations process. It's not lobbying.
No,
it's asking about the process. You may not like the answers you're going to get right now, but it is not lobbying. It is asking for information about programs and services that they are advocating for, or they should be, or they're supposed to be in your community.
Yep. Another thing you can do is to be more strategic in your grant seeking. Up until now, maybe you just kind of like, we've got a good reputation. Anything we apply for, we're pretty lucky to get it. When there's less dollars, there's going to be more competition for those dollars. So you need to be more thoughtful about your grant seeking. And that could look like things rather than going after grants alone, maybe partnering with other communities, other nonprofits, other organizations. So instead of it impacting 500 people, now you're able to impact maybe 3,000 people, right? Or maybe instead of impacting just one county, now it's a 5-county regional project that's helping out. So having those collaborations and partnerships can be one way. And another thing is just focusing on those opportunities where you actually check all the boxes. It's one thing to be eligible for a grant, like any nonprofit that's a 501c3 can apply. Okay, well, that means any nonprofit can apply. But then, do you match the mission? Do they have funding priorities? Do you match those? Do you look similar to the types of organizations that were funded before? Kimberly and I have given the example probably 1,000 times. They may fund education, and you're like, great, I'm a K-12 school system. Sweet. But then you go and look, and they've only funded universities. They're probably not going to fund you. That's not a good
I'll go
fit.
there. Yeah.
But do you have a great working relationship with the local university? Do you do some programming together? Maybe they're the lead and maybe it's something that helps them and helps you, right? So it all boils back to looking over those applications and figuring out what's the best fit. And I would argue too, another thing to help your community as a whole, because hopefully you're not just like I'm only focusing on my organization. But if you really are wanting to help the community that you serve, sometimes it's going, this isn't a fit for me, but this is perfect for this other nonprofit I know, or this is perfect for our school system. And passing that on to them and letting them know that, like, hey, I think I found a perfect grant. We're not applying, but we think you should. Um, I think that's something we need to do more of, even beyond. If things get better and in 2030 things are fabulous and rolling well, I still think we need to be doing some of these things. So. The last thing I will point out is because, again, federal funding is just going to get harder and harder to get. You need to make sure that you are being good stewards of the current funding you have. Because I always tell people the best way to get grants is to be good at the grants you already have and make sure you're managing them well. So that means reports need to be submitted on time. They need to be accurate. They need to be detailed. You need to spend your money according to the budget, or if you do need to make changes, you're getting those budget approval received first before you make those changes, and you're spending your money in a timely manner. You're communicating with your funder, especially when things are going hinky, because I'm telling you, every grant is going to have something's going to be on back order. A staff you hired is going to quit 3 months later. Weather is going to delay a project because you're going to have, it's in the South and it's never snowed in 5 years, and suddenly you get, 5 snow days that just shut down Atlanta for 3 months, right? Things like that happen here. So communicating with your funder on a regular basis and just making sure that you understand all the things you're supposed to be doing and that you are doing them. So, because you want to show funders you're a low risk investment and that they want to, you make it easy for them to work with you. So they want to continue to fund you over and over again. I'm seeing more and more grant applications where part of the scoring process of your new proposal is, were your reports on previous awards, were they on time? Did you spend the money? Did you have any findings in your most recent audit? That's always been something they said they looked at, but now I'm seeing it actually on the scoring rubric of more and more funding opportunities. So I can't stress enough that you need to make sure you're managing your current grants well, or you're not going to have very much hope of getting grants the next year.
So I just wanted to wrap us up by saying, hey, let's take a minute and think about how this is related to potato chips and TikTok. Okay. So what I want to say is,
That's the last thing I thought you were going to say, by the way. I love it. Let's hear it.
so TikTok and potato chips are engineered. One is a food and one is a social media platform. And it's not just TikTok, but I'm just picking on them. Engineered a certain way to make you feel a certain way. Like potato chips are scientifically engineered to make you like the level of salt and fat and crunch and all the things. TikTok and any platform, any app where you're scrolling, right? Yeah. Scrolling is engineered by very smart, perhaps not people who have your best interest in mind, to get you to keep scrolling. Mm-hmm. These changes that happened in 2025 were fast and furious and seemingly coming out of nowhere. But we already know they didn't come out of nowhere. They came out from a plan. So the plan is there, but what we don't know is the speed, although we have a better idea now, the speed with which things are going to be implemented. These changes and this speed and this seeming arbitrary nature is designed, and it's a much more nefarious version, although potato chips and TikTok are doing a heck of a lot of societal damage on certain levels. This is a higher level of wanting you to feel off balance and off kilter and scared and all the things and mad and confused. It's intentional. So for me, and making healthy choices about my food, it helps me to understand that highly processed food is designed to make me want to overeat it. And TikTok or shorts or I'm not on Instagram
Stories.
yet. Stories, but reels and stories, right? That's what they're designed to do. So first off, they're designed to make me want to do this. Now, my choice is not. I need to live in a world where there's no potato chips, TikTok, or really weird, scary governments, because I don't think that's possible. Certainly not in this country. But what can I do about it? Now I know it's no secret, right? It's no secret. So then it becomes in 2026 and beyond, like you were talking about, Amanda. It's like, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
So let's be okay with, wow, this is big and scary. It's intended to be big and scary. That's part of the point. You can keep people from talking to each other. You can keep them being scared and want to keep their heads down. These are lessons in history for millennia, right? Certainly the 20th century, chock full of what this kind of government behavior can perpetuate on the people that it was designed to serve. So we don't have all the answers, but we're big believers in understanding what is going on, why it's going on, and then what can we do? Because it's not enough to understand it if you don't do anything about it. And then seeing what we can do together to best serve the communities that we say we're serving. I mean, that's it.
Absolutely. So, and I really wish we had that magic, this is going to solve all your problems, but that's not the world we live in. And so hopefully these practical tips will make life a little bit easier for you in 2026 and moving forward. If you've got any insight into the grant landscape, something we overlooked that you think that maybe has been helpful to you that you're willing to share so we can put it out to the HayDay community, we would love to hear from you. Please email us at hello@haydayservices.com. We are always happy to hear from our listeners, especially when you have tips and tricks that are going to make our life a little bit easier, particularly when it comes to grant seeking.
Thanks again to today's sponsor, Grant Guru. If you want to learn more about this incredible new tool to the grant prospect research market, visit grantguru.com/US. You'll find the link in our show notes.
And remember, they are providing a 20% off discount code on your subscription. So when you go to make your purchase, enter the code HayDay963. That's HayDay 963.
So I would just say, I always feel better knowing where I stand, even if I don't like where I stand, but knowing where I stand and the why helps me feel better about moving forward. And I hope that it helps you too, because that's one of the reasons we have been doing this podcast since 2018 is we want to share, we want to learn, and we want to be transparent and not gatekeeping about what's going on and how we can all do a better job together.
Yep. We're so honored you chose to spend time with us today. Join us again in 2 weeks where we're going to talk about grant language, specifically what to do when there are trigger words you're expected to avoid in your application. So we'll see you then.